I'm Mayor Lyrian Gaylor-Baird, and to my left is Councilmember Tammy Ward, and to my right is Regent Tim Clare. This is a public meeting subject to the Nebraska's Open Meetings Act, a copy of which is located in the back of the chambers. Our order of business will be that our clerk will read each item on the agenda, and then staff will come forward to present on the topic. We will take public comment on each item, and if each speaker could please limit their testimony to 5 minutes and provide their name and address for the record, we will proceed and call the first item. Casey.
Item number 3, approval of the minutes from the JPA meeting held September 24th, 2020.
Moved by Claire.
Second.
Seconded by Ward. Any discussion of the minutes? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Claire.
Yes.
Gaylor-Baird.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Motion carried 3-0. Next item is item number 4, approval of September 2020 payment register and review of the September 2020 expenditure reports.
Good afternoon, members of the board. So before you have the September 2020 payment register under the payment register tab in your binder. Give you some highlights of that register. So we have $24,176 for the Musco lighting project. So that's the final payment for the light project at the arena for the Arena Bowl. We had $557,969.20 of refunds to the suite and loge holders. So those were all identified as refund 2021 PBS use fees. So we're refunding those to the suites and loges until a future decision will be made on the value amount for the use of the arena. Yes. Oh, I said PBS. Yeah, PBA, sorry. Then we have the sponsorship increment that's received from IMG. Then we pay that back to the arena for $287,171.50. We had the first quarter operating increment payment of $150,000. The DEC payment of $219,508, of which 69% of that's billed back to the customer base within the JPA footprint. We have the arena maintenance item of $25,448.62, which is basically to pay for various maintenance contracts and stuff that occur at the arena on a monthly basis. We have the Canopy Park LLC's sewer line settlement payment, which I think the board approved at the last meeting, of $41,067.13. And then we have the parking deck management for $92,149.84. So I will pause there and see if there's any questions in regards to the payment register. No? Okay. Under your tab of West Haymarket Fund Statement of Revenues, Expenditures, and Changes in Fund Balance, you have the report for September, which is the first month in our fiscal year. So as of September, we had revenues of $1.9 million, expenditures of $749,000 for a surplus of about approximately $1.1 million. So beginning balance of $40.7 million and an ending balance of $41.8 million for September. And then also you had under the tab PBA income statement, you have two income statements from Pinnacle Bank Arena for August 31st, 2020. So that was at year end. You can see the arena brought in $3.3 million in revenue, had expenditures of $5 million for a deficit of $1.7 million for an ending balance of negative $775,000. As of September 30th, 2020, they had revenues of $146,000 in total, expenditures of $371,000 for a deficit of $223,000 for an ending balance of negative $999,000. So With that, I'll stand for any questions. All of the items on the payment register are also included on the expenditure report that's in your packet.
Any questions?
So from a budget standpoint, where are we in where are we in relation to where we thought we were going to be when we first started?
So overall, year to date, this is the first month, we're down 13% compared kind of to the prior year at the same time. However, when you look at where we were originally projecting, we're still about 18% over that original goal. So we're cool.
What year will we?
Excuse me, Tim,
Oh.
could you pull that mic over?
Sorry. Where were we thinking we were going to be from what is it, 10 years ahead?
Yeah, so right now I think we're corresponding with 2029 from where we originally thought we would be. So
Okay, that's what I want to know. Thank you.
Any further questions for Brandon? Okay, we'll take public comment on this item. If anyone would like to speak, please come forward.
Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs. So, is 41 million actually what's left from the bonds?
So in relation to the fund statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, so that 41 million is basically cash on hand. All of the bond proceeds have been expended at this point in time.
Paid for?
No, we have not paid for the bonds. The bonds are paid back over a longer term period, but we issued the bonds, received the proceeds, and then draw those down. So, they were spent for the arena and the street projects and the infrastructure. So all the bond proceeds have been expended. So within that, there's no money still outstanding from bonds.
Okay, so, but you're supposed to pay back 324 million
That was the current outstanding bonds
balance?
as of August 31st, 2020.
Okay, so where is that? Does that show on here?
No, because this is statement of revenues, expenditures. That'd be more not reflected on this statement, but I could show you, our balance sheet type statements that would reflect those liabilities. So.
Okay, so this is just the monthly or the fiscal yearly balance, 41 million?
So it shows, the revenues year to date, expenditures year to date, and then fund balances accumulative throughout the year on this report.
Okay, so where is that balance then? It's not listed here, is that it?
Are you talking about the outstanding bonds?
Bonds, right, uh-huh.
That'd be more like a balance sheet item since it's a long-term liability
Okay,
that it would be reflected on. So I could show you some different statements that would have.
okay, so that's not included in all of this?
No,
Okay.
not in this report.
Okay. Do you have it covered?
Do we have the bonds covered? I mean, we'll be paying those bonds out for a significant period
Yeah.
of time, but like I
You
said
have the
earlier,
money
we're
now
in-
for it. You have the money now for it.
Yes, we paid all the bonds in full in the prior year, and unless there's something drastic that occurs that we don't collect any money within the current year, I mean, it would be, we have the money to pay the bonds back.
That's in a separate account?
No, I mean, it's all paid out of this West Haymarket JPA fund that the revenue comes in, and we collect, revenues from the occupation taxes and the suite and loge, and, we receive funds from the IRS for the bond subsidies, and then out of that collective revenue, we take that to pay off the bonds.
Okay. But it's not, there's no protected money right now.
I mean, we have sufficient funds to pay the bonds.
In another account.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding you. In another account. I mean, we have, all the money comes into this fund, and then we pay the bonds. It's expenditure that comes out of this fund. So as the revenue comes in through the occupation taxes and the various other revenues, we make bond payments in June.
Out of there, okay.
We make bond payments in June and in December.
1 minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but it's still a cash flow situation. You really don't have money right now to pay off the bonds.
Not off the bonds in full, but we've got enough to pay off the annual payments that are occurring.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to see that. I'll send you an email about it.
Okay.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'd ask if there's any further discussion on the payment register for
So
September.
Brandon, the bonds are going to be paid off over time, and the bonds are what we're getting at with this 41 million are funds available to make our payment as we projected. The balance in this fund right now is where we thought it was going to be in 2029, and so we're tracking right now with we're in great financial position.
Yeah, we're in good financial shape. We're going to be able to pay the annual payments.
And then as the occupation tax comes in the years to follow, and suite revenue comes in, and parking and naming rights and blah, 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 those monies come in, that will replenish the occupation tax fund, and that fund will then be used to pay further bond proceeds off.
Yeah.
Bond payments, I should say. Yes.
Yeah, and that 41 million that's currently sitting there, that's functionally the reserve.
Right.
So we've got sufficient reserve. Let's say we collected no funds at all, we would have sufficient money to pay on an annual basis. So yes, we're in good financial shape, and we've seen recovery in occupation taxes. And so we're in good shape right now to continue paying those bonds moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any further questions for Director Kaufman? All right. Yep. Nope. Okay. With that, take a motion to approve the September 2020 payment register.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ward, second by Claire. Please call the roll.
Claire,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Motion carried 3-0. Next item 5, WH20-28, resolution to approve tribute benches master plan for the West Haymarket.
Good afternoon. My name is Len Johnson. I am the Director of the Parks and Recreation Department here in Lincoln. We have a couple of items before the board this afternoon. The first of these that we'll be talking about is review and hopefully approval of a master plan for placement of tribute benches at the West Haymarket, or on property that is overseen by the West Haymarket JPA, more specifically the Pinnacle Bank Arena and the festival lot to the north. We've identified 10 locations where what we call tribute benches could be placed in the future. I'll provide, this is an image of what a tribute bench looks like. These are, they're fabricated from steel. They are powder coated. They have a place for an inscribed plaque in the rear portion of them. This is the standard tribute bench of the Lincoln Parks Foundation. The cost to sponsor a tribute bench is $3,000. And what that covers is the cost to purchase the bench, the cost to pay for the inscribed plaque that is mounted in the back of the bench. And then typically there is concrete, but not always concrete, involved in placing one of these benches. And a portion of the sponsorship price is also then used for an endowment that provides funding to repair a bench if one were to be damaged, or to replace the bench in the future. The process that we use is that if somebody's interested in sponsoring a tribute bench, they contact the Lincoln Parks Foundation. The Lincoln Parks Foundation coordinates that process. When it comes time to install the bench, the Parks and Recreation Department does the installation, and it's at that time that the bench comes into the ownership of this city. And like I say, we have developed a master plan that I think is before the board this afternoon that identifies up to 10 locations where tribute benches could be placed in the future. We felt that that would be a good start. We don't know how popular this program will be in that area. There's certainly other areas that potentially could be added in the future if there was interest in doing that.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Director Johnson?
So if somebody wanted to get a bench, how do they determine where the location would be? Is one location more than the other? Is the bench the same price regardless of where the bench is located?
Yeah, for us, or for the Parks Foundation, it's a standard price for a tribute bench, and so we don't price the benches based on the location. And so any one of the 10 locations, typically what we do, we do need to make sure that the West Haymarket JPA board is comfortable with this, that the way that we do it with the Parks and Recreation Department, we have a list of identified locations. We let the donor, the sponsor, identify which place they'd like to have the bench placed. And the Parks Foundation then has the ability to approve that. If the JPA board wanted to handle this differently, we could bring each one of these proposals to you for review and approval, or you could approve all 10 locations, and then as they get sponsored, we could let the sponsor identify which location they'd like to have the bench that they're interested in sponsoring. Let them identify that placement.
I think I would like to make sure that we would have ultimate approval over the location of each bench.
Okay.
I think that's important to our group, and I think it's important to us to make sure that it the location that you have is I'm fine with that, but I don't know. I just think it's on our property. I think we ought to have oversight over that.
And certainly we can bring as we get interest in sponsoring one of these benches, we can bring them to the West Haymarket JPA board for approval. The other thing that I should have mentioned is that working with the law department, the guidances that we've gotten is that as we're looking at inscriptions on plaques and that kind of thing that are on public property, we want to create what's called a limited public forum so that we have very narrow parameters for what can be placed on the plaque. So in this case, we're recommending that the plaque either have an inscription that would say dedicated to a name or donated by a name, so that it's very narrow and we don't have to have significant conversation about what is or may not be appropriate.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Lynn, help me understand. So we have 10, you've identified 10 locations. Is this something that we'll promote as the JPA? Is that something we, how will people know they can do this? And you mentioned after we hit the threshold of 10 that you have other locations that we can place, but how will we grow this? And you may have mentioned as well where the money goes. So could you just recap that for me if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I think placement of one of these there is probably going to cause interest in other people to place one of these benches in that location. The Parks Foundation on their website has information about tribute benches. We could add this as one of the options that they make available. And we can discuss whether there's interest in maybe having the information about sponsoring a tribute bench other locations. I know that in some locations in parks, we've actually have signage in a place, and maybe there's a place in, for example, in Pinnacle Bank Arena, where we might place that information that there is the opportunity to sponsor tribute benches. The proceeds, the way this works, and we obviously need to make sure that the board is comfortable with this, is that the Parks Foundation manages the financial side of this. So they are funding the purchase of the bench, the purchase of the inscribed plaque. If there's concrete involved, they reimburse the department for that expense. The portion that goes into the endowment fund, the Parks Foundation manages that endowment fund. And then if a bench needs to be repaired or if a bench needs to be replaced, they fund that expense.
That's clearly, and not intended, obviously, to be, it's not a fundraising opportunity at any level for any of us, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we really, I think if Maggie Stuckey, the director of the Parks Foundation, were here, I think she would say along with me is this is really a community service.
Got
It's
it.
not a fundraising.
Right.
This is really
right.
an opportunity for the community.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Appreciate the foresight in including maintenance costs into the cost of the purchase of a bench. That helps keep it looking good and up to standards for the community, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Okay. Would anyone like to speak to this item?
Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs. Who is paying for this? Is the family paying for the 3,000? Are there any taxpayer funds that are expended on this?
There are no taxpayer funds.
Okay, so the family's paying for
Yeah,
it?
the family, the sponsor, pays the $3,000 cost to sponsor the bench.
Okay, through the endowment, through your endowment?
They make the payment to the Parks Foundation, and then the Parks Foundation distributes the funds.
To you. And you're sure it's only going to cost 3,000 and quoted that to them?
We have, yes.
Okay.
All right, is there any further questions of staff before we? All right, I'd entertain a motion on the resolution to approve the tribute benches master plan for the West Haymarket.
So moved.
Do you want to second that, and then we can open up?
Okay, second.
Okay,
But I still think what we're talking about on the motion, and believe me, I'm in favor of Dan Marvin. Ultimately, we get to Resolution 2022. I'm in favor of Dan. I've said it many times, we wouldn't have gotten this project done without him. But I don't know if this Resolution 2028, and then even the motion to amend, I guess I would like to have like a plan. What is your plan in terms of the, you said a lot of things today, which I think are great, but none of that's covered in these two proposals. And I'm not sure, for the record, if we want to move forward on something that we don't know the answers, or the answers were what was discussed with us, not what's in writing here, is what I'm getting at.
We could certainly put all of that in writing if you'd like, and we could attach it to the resolution.
Well, I think that would be important. But it's not going to be here for approval today, right?
Correct. And I apologize.
Yeah, I guess I would propose, Mayor, that and I'm sorry to do this, and Chris,
Oh.
I'm sorry to do this, but I think we have to do this right. And I think to have the entire agenda and the plan of what we're going to do with these benches all be attached here, and not have it be a deal where we'll come back and put the plan in later. I think it's important to have the whole thing available to everybody. So I would propose that we delay this until our next meeting.
okay, do you want to withdraw your motion and we'll begin anew?
Or amend it, or I don't know what you do. What do we do?
Yes.
The original motion was proposed by Ward and seconded by Claire, but
I will hereby withdraw the motion to approve the
Okay.
plan.
Do we need to vote on that withdrawal? No? Can be verbal?
I'll withdraw it. Mhm.
But then you're going to want to continue this on to the next agenda.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to continue item WH 20-28 to delay to our next, or to continue to our next meeting. Is that sufficient time for you, Director Johnson?
It is.
Yep,
It
okay.
is.
It's so moved.
She
Or-
moved a continuation of this item to our next
second
meeting.
then.
Okay, second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, yes, no.
Okay, that was moved by Ward and seconded by Claire, and that was a motion to continue item WH 20-28 to our next meeting in November. Please call the roll.
Claire,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
motion carried 3-0. Next item, WH 20-22, resolution to approve park bench in memory of Patricia Marvin on property generally located east of the festival parking lot at the north end of the Lincoln Bridge.
Again, Lynn Johnson with Lincoln Parks and Recreation. The location that's being proposed for this bench is one of those that's identified in the master plan that the board reviewed. And it's this location at the north end of the Lincoln Bridge and just east of the festival lot. And probably this gives you a better look at that location. There is a small plaza at the north end of the Lincoln Bridge, and this would be on an area that is lawn, that would be on the east side, pardon me, on the west side of the curb at the top of the stairs there. And we'd be replacing an area of turf with some concrete, and then there's a series of retaining walls that step down to the parking lot. And so the bench would be placed in that location, and it'll be oriented so that it has a view back to Pinnacle Bank Arena. And it would be the bench that I just showed the board.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Regent Claire, would you like to continue this item as well, since it's an accompanying piece?
Perhaps. And again, it's no reflection on the Dan Marvin. It's a reflection on, I think before we start doing this, we need to have the plan identified and then show that we're following the plan with respect to this item. So I would move that we table this or continue this to next meeting.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Motion to continue to our next meeting of item WH 20-22, moved by Claire and seconded by Ward. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, please call the roll.
Claire,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
motion carried 3-0. Next item, WH 20-29, resolution approving 2 unit price contracts with Empire Fence and Netting for a total amount not to exceed $10,112.34 to install fencing, gates, and bollards around portions of the old railroad bridge located on property generally or legally described as West Haymarket Edition Outlet A pursuant to bid number 16-280.
Caleb Swanson, PC Sports Project Control. This is a bridge that we have talked about in the past couple of meetings. I apologize, I don't have a map in front of me. But this is the bridge that is just to the west of the Breslow Ice Center. It was acquired from the railroad before the project began. It was part of the land acquisition. It is an old abandoned railroad bridge. This is the bridge that the board has previously given the University of Nebraska to do some testing and some engineering experiments on. And so the resolution before you today would, after the university is done conducting their load experiments, we would install some fencing, some gates, some bollards to protect the public from straying onto that bridge and potentially injuring themselves. It is just an open bridge right now. You can cross the Salt Creek just on foot. There's no path leading directly to it, but there's also nothing preventing someone from either walking onto or trying to drive a bike or other vehicle out onto the bridge, and it's not intended for that purpose. So this would secure both ends of the bridge.
Any questions?
From an attractive nuisance standpoint, and maybe this is for you, Chris, from an attractive nuisance standpoint, would the fence and I assume some signage or something keep this, be sufficient to keep our liability at a minimum?
Chris Connolly, Assistant City Attorney. Yes, I believe it will. We've talked about a number of options on how to keep people and vehicles out, and we believe it's 6-foot fencing. How tall is the fencing?
I'd have to double check. It's either 6 or 8 foot. I don't have that.
We believe that'll be sufficient, and if we find that additional measures are necessary, then we'll take them. But it will have fencing that will go all the way around, so the people that may want to try and adventure out and try to hang off the side of the bridge are going to have a difficult time doing that as well. And so, so we think this is certainly a good first step.
I took Professor Green for tours 30 years ago. Maybe it's 31 years ago. I just want to make sure that we're protected there.
Pat Green, I'm sure, described it for you correctly, yes. Yes.
Okay. Any further questions?
And I did fail to mention, these funds would be coming from the endowment that was I apologize. Nope, not this one, the next one. Scratch that comment.
Pleasantly surprised for a minute.
Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this item?
Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs. Is this where the university is doing work? Or is somebody else doing work here?
So
I'm going to interrupt just a minute. Sorry, I just wanted to ask, when we have two people standing kind of close in proximity without masks, I think there is some risk, and maybe as one person's talking, you could just take a step back or have a seat while the other's talking. Happy to facilitate the discussion, but just in the interest of safety.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm not going to spit on him.
Yeah, so I can try to just leave my mask on too. At the previous board meeting, the last month, the board approved a right of entry agreement with the University of Nebraska. The College of Engineering is looking to do some load experiment testing on this bridge, where they will place different weights basically on the bridge, and they'll monitor it and measure the stresses in the various components of the bridge with the intent of researching how infrastructure behaves long term.
So why aren't they paying for it then?
Well, the university does not own the bridge. The board was just giving them the permission to conduct some experiments. This is a bridge. This is the condition that the bridge has been in. And I think at this point, we are just recommending to the board that it is a potential liability, a safety issue for the public. Whether or not the university was performing these experiments, I think we would be making the same recommendation. The only factor here with the university is waiting until they're done.
What?
The only reason I bring up the university is that we're waiting until they're done with their experiments to install the protection, the fencing and the bollards.
But they wanted to do this, right?
No, their testing has nothing to do with making the bridge secure for the public. This is just it's a coordination issue between the university and when we do the fencing. Whether or not the university was performing these tests, the bridge would still be there in the condition that it's in. And so we would be making the recommendation to the board to make the bridge safe, whether or not UNL was involved.
They were
at all.
doing that? It wasn't safe before?
Correct. There's never been any fencing on this bridge because it was an old active rail bridge prior to the JPA purchasing it. And so when the JPA purchased it, they purchased it as is. And so there was no, because trains had been using it, there was no fencing or anything else on it at that point.
What was the last? I didn't hear that.
There's never been any fencing or bollards or anything protecting this bridge since it's been abandoned.
So why wasn't this done originally then?
I think it was just an item that nobody had addressed until now.
Nobody had what?
Nobody had addressed it until now.
Why? There's a lot of expenses here.
Chris Connolly, Chief Assistant City Attorney. There's been no claims on this, so it hasn't cost the JPA a penny, but we're trying to make it safe now as we've looked at it and decided that it's time to make this bridge safe. Now, in the meantime, the university approached us and said, we'd like to do these experiments. And so we said, go ahead and do them. In the meantime, we've been lining up a contractor, and that's what this is all part of. So if the board approves this now, then we'll wait for the university to finish up, and they don't have a great amount of time to do that. They only have a limited amount of time to do their experiments. But once they're done, they're off the bridge, and then we're going to make this bridge safe. if we made it safe before the university wanted to do their experiments, they wouldn't be able to do it. Okay, they wouldn't be able to get the equipment onto the bridge that they want to use to do that with. And we went through the right of entry agreement previously on what their responsibilities are in the event that they go on the bridge and they damage it. So we've already covered all that. So the reason for, regardless of whether or not we've done something previously, we haven't had any claims brought as a result of the bridge. Okay?
So this is
1 minute.
This is what?
This is an effort to put fencing and other protective measures around the bridge so that somebody can't get hurt on it.
Okay, but nobody thought about that ahead of time.
No, we didn't take any measures to do that previously. That's correct.
The original contractor didn't think about that.
I don't know that it was the contractor's responsibility because nothing was built there. There are no buildings or other structures owned by the JPA or anyone else real close to that bridge. The closest thing is the ice rink, that's not the university's problem. The bridge is not the university's problem.
So just now, they've come up and decided they needed it.
The JPA has decided that, correct.
Well, Caleb,
No, it wasn't just Caleb, it was other staff too.
it was what?
Staff, our city staff that
Five
does the
minutes.
work. So,
It seems ridiculous that you could spend this money to back down.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, is there any further questions for staff that my colleagues have? No? Okay, I'd entertain a motion on item 7.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ward, second by Claire. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Claire,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Motion carried 3-0. Next item, WH 20-30, resolution approving unit price contract with MTZ Construction for a total amount not to exceed $3,875 to remove and replace concrete located at the bottom of the pedestrian bridge by Pinnacle Bank Arena pursuant to bid number 16-285, to be paid out of the endowment fund.
Caleb Swanson, PC Sports. This is a location that is right at the base of the ramp on the east side of the arena, where it ties into the plaza just behind the Harvest Art Sculpture. What we've been seeing, the city received a citizen's complaint in this area a few weeks ago. As that ramp and that plaza area are de-iced every winter, a lot of that de-icing material, as things thaw, it all runs down to the drain that is at the base of that ramp and kind of ponds in that area, and so we're seeing a little bit of deterioration in the surface of the concrete there much quicker than other areas, just because of the concentration of a lot of the de-icing materials. You see that a lot around drains that are in pavement. So what this does, because of the trip hazard, obviously, with the heavy pedestrian use of that ramp, it just replaces about depending on the portion, a 4 to 6 foot wide strip of concrete right at the end of that ramp around that drain. The drain is fine, we'll be able to reuse that. All we're doing is replacing the deteriorated concrete. And this, because it is a maintenance item, is eligible for endowment funding.
Questions? All right, thank you. Would anyone like to testify on this item?
You take your mask off. I can't hear you. Why is this being done, and why does it need to be replaced?
The concrete is deteriorating, so it is crumbling. With as all of the salts and other de-icers are used every winter to keep the ramp from icing over, all of that then melts and it runs down the ramp towards the drain, and so then all of those chemicals, they have a deteriorating effect on the concrete, and so because of everything going across that drain area, that concrete is crumbling and deteriorating just around the drain. It's about the width of the bridge, so about 15, 18 feet wide by 4 feet, 6 feet deep. So that it is crumbling. The top inch or so is just completely deteriorated away.
How
So
thick was it?
The pavement, I believe, in that area is 5 inches thick.
What?
5 inches thick. pavement,
Okay.
which is a typical
And
sidewalk.
why aren't you
Yep.
going after the original construction company?
Because this is not a warranty problem. It's not a problem with the concrete. This is an issue inherent with salts and de-icing materials. You see it throughout the city. It's why you have potholes. It's why you have cracks and chips in sidewalks. It's something that in a northern environment like this with de-icing, it's part of what comes with concrete, with keeping the ice off of it. It's what would be considered normal maintenance.
By your evaluation or MTZ Construction, or whose idea?
Whose idea was it to do this?
No, whose idea is that this was going to happen?
I guess I don't follow the question. The idea that it was going to deteriorate?
Okay, you're saying it's like potholes in the streets. Is that what you're saying?
It's a similar effect.
Okay, so why in the original, wasn't it made thicker, or why wouldn't you go back to them?
The thickness of the concrete would have no difference on whether or not the surface deteriorates because of the salts and other
Is this a
chemicals.
design flaw?
No.
It's just an ongoing maintenance?
This is part of what comes as a side effect of keeping ice melted on the concrete. There are some long-term effects on, and it doesn't happen to every patch of concrete. It's just happens in certain areas. And like this, like I said, with it being at the drain, all of those salts and other de-icers that are used on that ramp, as they melt, it all runs down the ramp to this drain as it's intended to drain the plaza, and so you end up with a high concentration of all of those salts, which is why you would see deterioration happening there and not everywhere where the salt is spread.
And that's your company that said that, or MTZ Construction?
I think that would be what I would call an industry standard. I think if you would talk to anybody that deals with concrete maintenance, Public Works would agree
So
with
you're
that
saying if
statement.
they had, you're not saying, or you're not indicating that if they had built this differently, it wouldn't have happened?
No. You could have built it thicker, you could have added more steel, you could have done all kinds of things, and the surface condition would not have changed, and it still would have
So this is
deteriorated.
PC Sports that's saying this?
We are the ones presenting the recommendation to the board, yes.
No. And you recommended it to the JPA here?
That's what we're doing here today, yes. The complaint came in from the city's online system. A citizen complained about the deterioration, and so we investigated the problem.
1 minute.
We sought bids from the city's unit price vendors. MTZ was the lowest responsible bidder, and so we're here recommending that solution to the board.
And this is not going to happen again?
I don't think that you can guarantee that it will never happen again, no.
So, the taxpayers can expect that this would come up again?
I can't guarantee that it will or will not. I would say that concrete, just like anything else that you build, requires maintenance. Nothing is maintenance-free, and this is one area in which concrete requires maintenance.
Okay, well, in the next thing, there's similar, and that seems, it needs to be investigated.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Seeing none, I ask my colleagues if they have any further questions for staff.
Caleb, just point of clarification. A citizen saw this, it's deteriorated naturally. We set up an endowment fund that was set up 3 or 4 years ago. The interest income off of that is what's paying this.
Correct.
So yes, the taxpayers contributed to this money that we put into this fund, but the interest income that was generated off that fund is what's being used to pay this.
Correct.
It's not coming out of any JPA coffers.
It
or
is
anything
not
like that.
affecting the JPA operations budget at all. It's coming out of the endowment.
Second question, aesthetically, I assume that it'll be put it back with the same colored to the concrete that we have throughout.
The discussion to put it back, one of the difficulties with colored pavements is getting them to match. Even oftentimes, if you're doing a large area, one truck to another, there will be variations. So as we looked at it, at where this was, you have a transition there with the ramp being a gray concrete and the concrete around it being the kind of, I'll call it a purple concrete. There have been other areas where there's been some more fiber projects. I'm giving you a lot of information here. Along the R Street area where there's been some colored concrete that was patched back. And those patches do not match well with that. And that's the nature of colored concrete. So the discussion has been, rather than try to put back a colored patch that's probably not going to match well, to go back with a gray concrete because it matches the bridge or the ramp then. You always have right there a gray to colored transition. So instead of having a gray to pink to purple, we're just going to do a gray concrete to match the bridge because you can get a gray blends in much better.
So it will be as wide as, it'll be like a gray along here?
Correct.
To cover for this deterioration by the...
And it's deteriorating. It's harder to see in the image, but it is deteriorating all along the length of the worst point, yes, is over on the right side of the picture there, but it is deteriorating along the length of the drain. Yes.
I want to make sure it looks nice.
Mm.
Any other comment? All right, thank you. Okay. I'd entertain a motion on item 8.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Claire, second by Ward. Any further discussion? Thank you for your thorough explanation, and please call the roll.
Claire,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Motion carried 3-0. Item WH 20-31, resolution approving unit price contract with MTZ Construction for a total amount not to exceed $18,785 to remove and replace concrete located at front entrance to Pinnacle Bank Arena pursuant to bid number 16-285 to be paid out of the endowment fund.
Caleb Swanson with PC Sports. This is another area on the south side of the arena that also received a citizen's complaint. This is in front of one of the wide banks of the double doors that lead into the south side of the arena. I believe there's 5 sets of double doors, so it's a significant run of concrete. And the issue that we're seeing there is with where the plaza pavement ties in to the stoop, which is the concrete that you place in front of a door that actually sits on a footing so that you don't have a frost heave problem with opening and shutting your door. And there's an issue there with, again, partially related to, that's an area where you have a lot of salts and a lot of de-icing agents, which deteriorate the concrete. And then we also have the steel that was designed and used to tie that concrete to the stoop was a non-epoxy coated rebar, which is an industry standard. That's very normal for that to be done that way. But that is accelerating the deterioration without that epoxy coating on the steel. So you're having a lot of rust spots, and that accelerates the chipping and the spalling in the concrete. So we've looked at this. Again, we bid this out to the city's unit price list. MTZ was the lowest responsible bidder. The construction that will be going back to replace the stoop and a couple of the panels around will be per the original design, except now we are putting back in epoxy coated rebar. It is a small additional expense, but in our opinion, it is well worth the small additional cost for the epoxy coated steel lines. And this is also coming out of the endowment. And any questions?
What about making sure, again, the color issue?
The stoops that are being taken out, none of those are colored. So those are all gray rectangles that come out of the building already. So those will go back as gray.
Okay.
Any other questions for Caleb? Okay, thank you. Would anyone like to testify on this item?
Jane Kinsey with Watchdogs. Has a construction engineer looked at this to see if there is some other remediation for it?
As far as what to do with the stoops?
Yeah, but you're just saying the concrete is deteriorating. It's what, 5 years or 6 years maybe that this was built. And if you throw all this money out there without some kind of an idea for remediation, you're just going to be throwing good money after bad.
And that is one of the reasons, the primary reason why we are changing. So in certain, not in all pavement applications, but in this application where the sidewalk, which just bears on grade on the ground, ties into the stoop, which is the slab in front of the door that sits on a footing, there are pieces of rebar steel that tie those two together. When those were designed and installed 8 years ago, they were just, they call it black steel. There's no coating or anything on those pieces of steel that tie the slabs together. We are recommending that they put the replacement bars that go in what's known as an epoxy coating. So if you see them on a site, they'll be a green steel, and that provides a chemical barrier that should assist with the longevity of the reinforcing in this slab to help it resist deterioration better than black steel would.
So you accepted the first part. PC Sports accepted the first idea?
The initial design did not use epoxy-coated reinforcing, and like I said, that is what you would call an industry standard. I think as the board knew during the design and construction of this entire area, you can always spend more money. It's a decision of where to allocate your resources, and in this case, the decision was made to go with the black reinforcing steel.
It's real easy to spend other people's money, taxpayers' money. And you have had no professional evaluation of this by a construction engineer?
We had a construction firm come out and look at it, yes, and their recommendation was to do what we are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because a stoop is what's considered structural concrete, it is not something that you can really patch back. It just won't behave the same way, and it's kind of the concept of quickly patching a pothole versus replacing a section of street. If we were to just patch in some kind of a grout over this, we would be back here in 6 months asking the board for additional funds to repair the patch.
Mm. It was MTZ Construction that evaluated this?
Correct.
Or somebody else?
MTZ was one. We also had DLR, who was the original engineer on the project. They looked at a variety of these issues, and their suggestion was also to replace the stoop. Mm-hmm. MTZ was one of the firms that came out and looked at it and provided a price per.
And this is going to solve the problem?
It will fix the deteriorated concrete, yes.
Mm-hmm. For how long?
I can't give you
nobody knows.
We would be implementing what would be considered best practice in the industry.
Okay. Well, you're in trouble financially because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. You ought to be spending taxpayers' money more carefully than just, this needs to be done. It's most discouraging to the public when they see that the city, the PBA are in trouble, and I hope you're not going to say that they aren't, because you don't know what the future holds in this situation of a pandemic. It could go on for years and you would have less income. So you need to be more careful about how you spend money. You need to get some kind of guarantees about these things and be more careful. The taxpayers are worried about the city and the PBA, even if you aren't. So maybe we need to start bombarding you with email about people's concerns, and then you would have some idea of how the public feels about all of this.
Is anyone else here to comment on this item? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion on number 9.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ward, seconded by Claire. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Claire,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Motion carried, 3-0. Next item, set next meeting date for Thursday, November 19th, 2020 at 2:30 PM here in council chambers.
Thank you, Casey. And with that, I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ward, second by Claire. Please call the roll.
Claire,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes,
Ward.
Yes.
we are adjourned. Thank you.